Hello, everyone, and welcome to today's presentation on Leaders in Transition, Ensuring Success. My name is David Witt. I'll be your host today. I'm speaking to you from the Blanchard Company's headquarters in San Diego, California. I am really excited today. We've got two wonderful experts on the subject of coaching joining us today. We've got Patricia Overland. Patricia is one of the coaches in the Blanchard Company's Coaching Services Division. Patricia's worked with a wide variety of clients. I'm sure it's over 100 different engagements, helping executives to transition into new roles, step into leadership for the first time. Patricia, so good to have you with us. Thanks for being here.
Thank you. I'm delighted to be here.
And then I'm also very excited in studio with me today here in San Diego. We've got Madeleine Blanchard. Madeleine is the co-founder of the Blanchard Company's Coaching Services Division. Madeleine's a Master Certified Coach, and Madeleine was also instrumental in the founding of the International Coach Federation. Madeleine, good to have you with us also.
Thrilled to be here. Thanks.
We're going to take a look at coaching in organizations with a special focus on transition coaching. And to kick us off, I'm going to turn the presentation over to Patricia Overland. Patricia.
Hi, everybody. So nice to have you all on the call with us. So I'd like to start out with today what we'd like to cover with you. And Madeleine and I have been thinking about this with our greater team for quite some time. And so first we'd like to share with you that coaching really is the best way to support leaders in transition. We'll share with you some of the latest research and what that reveals. And then we're going to talk about the 4 different types of executive transition as a way to help you think through how you are onboarding your leaders. And finally, critical elements to build into your transition strategy to ensure that your leaders don't fail. So with that in mind, thinking about who really uses coaching in organizations and how they are putting it to use in organization, in the past decade, coaching, whether that's internal or external, has really become something that many organizations are using. It's on the rise and it's persuasive. So it's used for a number of different reasons. And a recent study by the Conference Board shows that 88% of coaching used in organizations is focused on development and growth. 67% is focused and tied to 360 feedback or other assessment tools, often in a high potential program or in a fast track leadership program where feedback is essential to help people learn and grow. And 49% of organizations are using coaching in performance related issues or challenges where we're really trying to get at the bottom line and helping people perform at their best. And finally, 45% of organizations are working to use coaching and leverage it around transitions. And so that's the thing that we'd like to talk to you about today. This idea of transition is the one where it's most fraught with potential failure, but more and more organizations are realizing that a multifaceted approach is really necessary to support leaders who are in transition.
So I'm going to be talking a little bit about the positive impact of coaching, and I would actually have to bet that every single person on this webinar today actually knows this stuff. So as we're walking through this slide a little bit, I would really appreciate it if you would write in the chat what is your personal experience with coaching. Either you've worked with a coach yourself, or you are a coach, which presumably means you've worked with a coach in the past, or you actually run a coaching program in your organization, just so I can get a sense of, to what extent are we singing to the choir here? Because I think we are. And hopefully one of the reasons you're here is to hear about some of the latest research. So one of a benchmarking study done by Brandon Hall Group in 2016 showed that coaching and mentoring are seen as the most effective mode of training. And in one study from the ICF, 80% of people who received coaching experienced improved self-confidence. I mean, how bad can that be if that's happening in organizations? 73% have improved relationships. 72 improved communication skills, which is relationships and communication skills are the foundation of business success. And 70% experienced improved work performance, which is, of course, the bottom line. So looking at the chat here, a lot of you absolutely have the experience of the benefits of coaching. So this is really, it's fun to see this, and it's really important to us to kind of know who's here and know what your level of buy-in is to some of the things that we're talking about. Let's talk about the business impact of coaching. So we all know this, but what does it mean really that people, managers and leaders who get coaching have an effect on employee retention? Why is that? Because managers who get coaching can focus the kinds of discussion that they're having with their employees to address the right challenges in the right ways. Sometimes I think some of the clients we work with, if they didn't have a coach, they'd be spending 85% of their time on one employee who's having trouble instead of properly focusing their attentions across the board. Building leadership and strengths. Leadership is complicated and hard. I mean, all you have to do is Google, not even Google, forget Google. Go on Amazon and type in leadership development. You could read from now until 2075 and still not be caught up on all the literature. So a coach is really going to help a manager or a leader identify their strengths, leverage those strengths, and then develop the new skills they need and have some accountability around some new and maybe uncomfortable behaviors. Coaching improves productivity, and there's plenty of research that shows that, mainly because coaching helps people stay focused on the important things they need to do and get their attention off things that maybe aren't so productive. And finally, and we've really leveraged this well at the Blanchard companies, is using coaching to increase learning retention and return on investment on learning, which is the holy grail for a lot of training professionals, is sustainability. I mean, every time we're talking about training with potential clients, the question is, what do you have for sustainability? What do you have for sustainability? How can we get people to do all the things that they intended to do in the afternoon of that training program? Well, the answer is really coaching, because we've tried, and we do it. We do it all. We do the electronic follow-up, the challenges on the websites, the 7-minute little learning bits and reinforcement bits. We do all of that. But nothing works quite as well as coaching, because think about it. It's a period of time out of the leader's day where they're doing nothing but thinking about, wait a minute, what did I learn in that training? What intentions did I set before I left that room? Am I actually doing the things I said I wanted to do? And if I'm not, what's getting in the way? So I hate to say it's kind of ironclad accountability, but the best person to hold themselves accountable is the actual leader. And the way to remind them of that is to get them into a conversation about it. So before we go any further, we just want to share our definition of coaching with you, because we all know if you ask 10 different people, what is coaching, you're going to get 10 slightly different answers. The good news is it's not quite as different today as it would have been 5 years ago, 10 years ago, God forbid, 20 years ago. Because I think we've all, as learning, leadership, training, and development professionals, pretty much gotten on the same page about what we're talking about when we talk about coaching. So this is our definition. We define coaching as a deliberate process using focused conversations to create an environment for accelerated performance and development. So develop a deliberate process, meaning it's not a random set of things that people do. It's a very defined process that can be replicated over and over again. focused conversations can mean voice to voice, in person or over the phone. It can be an email string. It can be a dialogue over text. It can be a dialogue using some kind of internet platform. But it is a focused conversation. And ultimately, what a coach and the client do together is co-create an environment that accelerates the performance and development of the client. So I'm going to turn it back to you, Patricia, to talk a little bit about transitions.
Thank you. So one of the things we're interested in the Ken Blanchard companies is, what is it that is happening out there in the world in terms of leadership and leadership development, and how can we support leaders in growing? Because we know that the more effective leaders are, first of all, the better organizations are, and certainly the lives of individuals inside those organizations can become more productive, happier, healthier, and certainly it helps the bottom line. So when we started to look at this idea of leaders in transition, one of the things we did was go out to see, well, what are the experts saying, and what does the research show? So I want to share a bit of that with you today. So Adam Robinson, who is the CEO of Hierology, he said in 2018 that 50% of all leaders who are in transition fail. So 50% of leaders either being promoted or moving up or coming in from the outside are very likely to fail in one way, shape, or form or another. And of course, that has huge impact on the bottom line and certainly on the well-being of everybody who works in the organization. So big number. When you look at the cost to an organization, if you look just at the C-level or senior leader level compensation in organizations, when leaders fail, they leave organizations and they take compensation with them. And that loss can be up to $48 million per executive per year. And the range actually was from 1.2 to $48 million. And that's not even calculating the lost opportunity cost, the churn that happens in an organization when a leader comes in and then leaves, or the churn that happens when a leader comes in and stays but is failing. So a huge dollar cost to organizations that could be spent elsewhere if you can really help leaders come in and be successful. We also found that a Gallup poll in 2018 looked at what was the impact on people when leaders were failing or when they were bad leaders. And what it showed was that 50% of people are going to leave their company as a result of the relationship that they have with their manager. And when that manager is not a good leader or not a good manager, or when they're failing, that can be a direct link and a direct cause to people leaving. And again, huge cost associated with retention and all of the churn, again, that can cause in an organization. We also found an HBR article that said that onboarding programs, so this is the program that many of you may be administering to help leaders as they promote up in organizations or as they come in from the outside, that a significant number of those programs are failing to meet the needs of the leader. And then when we fail to meet needs, that leader isn't successful, and then you get right back into this idea of leaders who are failing in their transition. And finally, the McKinsey Quarterly, published in 2017, said that 89% of CEOs in organizations, and they surveyed more than 500 leaders, believed that their leadership development programs, the programs that were intended to fill the pipeline and help leaders be super effective in organizations, 89% of those CEOs said that the programs were failing to fill their leader pipeline. So they weren't able to promote people from within because readiness wasn't there, or skills weren't there, or mindset, or culture fit. So there were many different factors in that. So these are pretty big numbers in terms of thinking about, what happens if you bring a leader or put a leader into a position and then they're not successful. So as we go through this presentation today, one of the things we'd like to share with you are how do we define transition? What do we mean when we say that? So the first of those is that when you are hiring a leader from outside the organization and they're coming in, what is it that person really needs to focus on to be successful? So we've worked with hundreds and thousands of leaders across the world. We've provided executive coaching to them and coaching for learning. And what we found from the work that we've done with our leaders are that the critical success factors for leaders coming from outside into an organization are, first of all, that they have to achieve success fairly rapidly. There's an expectation. It used to be 120 days. That got shortened to about 90 days. Now I am hearing regularly that if leaders don't start hitting goals and making impact in 30 days, that they feel like they're failing, or the organization may sort of want to rethink and relook that leader's success. Leaders also need to really understand the decision-making process, and this is one of the things that coaching can help with so brilliantly, is to help people coming in from the outside to ask questions and to talk to people and to figure out what is the formal and informal decision-making process, and how does that leader need to embed themselves in that process so that they can be successful. A few years ago, we were coaching a leader at a big retail outfit that we're going to share more with you about in a few minutes. And one of the things he said to his coach was, I had asked these questions in my interview. I thought I understood the culture. I get in and I find out that people go around each other to make decisions. They don't make decisions in meetings. They are making decisions in the hallway, at the water cooler, not where I thought it was going to happen. And so he really had to adapt his style and his process so that he could be successful and get things done. The other thing that we hear regularly from people who are coming from outside the organization into leadership positions in organizations is that they need help and support in navigating the culture. What it looks like from the outside and what it is in truth can often be very, very different. So the culture can be as simple as something like who goes to lunch with whom. It can be as complex as how does an executive decision get made, or as complex as how do resources get shared, and how do business units work together. What are the values and belief system of an organization, and how does that then inform how that organization really operates? And finally, super critical for leaders as they come in from the outside to build a team and to pay attention to building that team in a way that is both rapid and effective. And that can be defined differently by different organizations. So that's new leaders from outside the organization. Another form of transition is new leaders that are promoted from within the organization. And so this may be a leader who was part of a peer group and is now working over that peer group as the senior leader or manager. It could be someone who's moving from one business unit to another and has been promoted over a team. And this can be at all levels in the organization. So again, what we found when we started to look at, what's really critical for the success of leaders who are promoted from within, some of the elements were a little bit different than as you come in externally. For example, straddling the old and new responsibilities, right? So leaders often are leaving one job for another. They have both a responsibility around that old job to make sure that things still happen, that work still gets done. They feel a responsibility to their team. They don't want to let their old team down. And yet they have this whole new set of responsibilities, whole new set of people potentially that they're working with, and a whole new set of expectations. So that straddling can be a challenge for many leaders because they have pretty strong feelings often about where they came from and where they're going. It's also often important to pay attention to managing former teammates. And so that can be as complex as I am now managing someone who wanted the job that I got and they didn't. We're actually coaching an individual right now in an organization who went after the top spot, didn't get it. The new CEO is thinking very carefully about how to keep that person engaged and retain them, because that's important to her. And the person who didn't get the job is very valuable to the organization. And there are obviously feelings associated with not getting the top spot, feelings associated with having to report to a former peer. So managing that can be complex. The other thing that leaders who are promoted from within need to pay attention to is building the team. And you'll see that this is a common theme across all types of transition, that getting your team in place and getting them functioning and functioning well can be critically important. And what we hear from our clients, organizational sponsors, often is that this is one of the most critical elements that leaders in transition need to pay attention to, because they are being put in leadership positions with the expectation that they can make that team a high-performing team or create an environment where their team can be high-performing. We also found that it's important for that leader to build a coalition. So when you are promoted within an organization, as a leader, you need to have people in your corner to support your ideas, to support the vision and direction, to support the building of a new team, to support the changes that you may want to initiate as a promoted leader. So that coalition can be critical, and that can look different ways. So an executive coach, for example, is part of a coalition. Mentor could be part of a coalition. Your direct supervisor, when you're a leader in transition like this, certainly could be part of your coalition. So building that coalition coaching often can focus on that and really help the leader think that through and get very strategic about it. And finally, to refresh or revamp or repair perceptions. This can be especially important when you're moving within an organization because your reputation follows you. And people have perceptions about you, and they have stories in their head about who you are and how you're going to be as a leader based on their experiences with you and based on their perceptions. And so one of the things that coaching really helps leaders do is think that through and think about, well, how do people perceive me? And what is important, and how do I want to be seen as a leader? And so, for example, one of the things that Blanchard often offers leaders is an opportunity to do something called leadership point of view. So we have a whole process around this. If you're an executive coach and you've been out there in the world of coaching, you are probably coaching your executives on this, which is, what is their point of view as a leader? Where do they come from? What are their values? What are the stories that have caused them to become the leader that they are? And when leaders share that with others, it can really do a lot to either refresh how people see you as a leader or repair or revamp the perceptions of others. And so new leaders promoted within the organization is a second kind of transition of the four that we want to talk to you about today. So I'm going to turn it over to Mad to talk about the next kind.
The third kind of transition, which is change of scope, which sometimes involves a new title and an increase in salary. Sometimes it doesn't. But choosing and managing priorities, that just sounds so straightforward and simple, and it's so complicated. Building and developing teams, oh, hello, that's another full-time job that's is almost separate from your actual job, and meeting critical outcomes. But how do you actually know which outcomes are critical? In the words of one of our current clients, if I actually tried to accomplish all the stuff my boss wants me to accomplish, I would never go home. I would never sleep. And I remember once, years and years ago, I had a friend who went to one of the top business schools, like it might have been Harvard Business School, it might have been Stanford or INSEAD or one of those big schools. And she said, I nearly lost my mind until I figured out that the strategy in business school is to give you more work than you can possibly do. And half the job is figuring out what parts of the work you actually need to do and do well, what parts of the work you can kind of phone it in, and what parts of the work you can actually get away with not doing at all. And I thought, oh my gosh, that's what they're doing in organizations, this whole lean organization. These days, I'm very clear that part of the strategy is to give people so much work that they're constantly forced to prioritize, so the only stuff that gets done is the most critical stuff. But how do you figure out what that is? You can't always depend on your boss. You actually have to use your own critical thinking. And to do that, having a thought partner as a coach whose only agenda is your success can be unbelievably helpful. And then finally, the fourth kind of transition is managing a new team. So creating trust and rapport, understanding and managing the critical relationships, and not just the ones on your team, but with the people that your team needs to get things done in the organization, and then becoming a developer of others. So many managers and leaders do not get the memo that half the job is developing their people. They might hear it, maybe it's even in the job description as a bullet point, but to what extent do people actually think about, oh, wait, what does that mean? And what is required of me to do that? And if all of this seems really obvious, I will say, yes, it is. And I'm working with a client right now who's had a new boss for 6 months. Big organization. Very, very senior person. Public organization. You would think that this client would have had a one-on-one with his new boss by now in 6 months? Yeah, no. Hasn't even had a single one-on-one with his new boss. So clearly, a lot of new leaders are so over their heads, they can't even get on the phone for a half an hour with every single one of their new employees. So this is the situation out there these days. So what is that leader paying attention to? Who knows? Not her people, for sure. So coaching makes a massive impact on successful transitions. McKinsey Quarterly 2017 had a global survey of 500 leaders who believed that their leadership development programs were helping them to achieve and sustain desired results, the leadership development programs that contained coaching. So translating what they're learning into action, focusing on the behaviors that matter most. You know, you can have a laundry list of the 19 competencies that you're supposed to be working on. Nobody can work on 19 things. Ensuring sufficient reach across the organization. Most leaders, when they move into a new role, either it's a new organization or it's the organization they've been in, do not understand the playing field they are now on. And they continue to play the game that they've been playing. They don't understand what the new game is. And systematic reinforcement to ensure change sticks. And that really is what coaching is. So leaders who are coached are 3.2 times more likely to sustain behavior change and 8 times more likely to focus on the behaviors that matter. So let's talk about what a great transition includes. Back to you, Patricia.
Thank you, Madeleine. So again, we looked at hundreds of thousands of clients. We looked at what sorts of things caused a great transition to occur. We talked to a lot of our organizational sponsors who are in the same roles that many of you are in, and we asked them, what is it when a leader transitions in the 4 types that we've just discussed, and that transition is smooth, and they hit the ground running, and they achieve the outcomes, and they're successful in role? What exactly occurs as part of that transition? And so we found that there were really 5 key things that happened in successful transition. The first of those is clear goals. So it's actually kind of shocking how often newly promoted leaders or leaders who are hired from outside can't clearly articulate what their immediate goals are or what their long-term goals are. Because like Madeleine said, they may not have had the conversation with their senior leader in the 6 months that they've been on board. You can't afford to have leaders go 6 months without understanding what targets they're trying to hit. So clear goals, critically important in terms of what is it that they should be focused on, what are their priorities, what they should be doing, and then subsequently what their teams should be working on. And I'll give you just a small example of this. We were coaching in an organization a couple of years ago. We were coaching the entire executive team and then C-1, C-2, C-3. So all of those senior leaders, we were providing some executive learning for them through a leadership architecture, leadership development journey over about a 2-year period. And there were a lot of different elements to that experience. And one of the things we had the leaders do, because their leaders were in the room with them, was write on a Post-it note, what are your top 3 priorities? And then we had their boss do the same thing, and we had them exchange the Post-it notes. You would not have believed the shocked faces in the room and the gasps of surprise and in some cases outrage, because leaders were not clear about what it is that people should be working on. They hadn't had those conversations with people. So successful transition, outrage completely. Successful transition has to start with clear goals. The second critical element that we found when, again, we went out and talked to our clients and looked at the research was that leaders absolutely have to have support. So that can come, and we believe that it works really well when that support is in part from executive coaching. It can also come from mentoring, the relationship between the leader and their supervisor. So it can come in many different forms, but that support was absolutely critical. And that what needed to happen in terms of support, or needs to happen when a great transition is at play, is that the leaders have strategic partners to help them think through and talk through their strategy, and to think through and talk through about where they need to build critical relationships, what kinds of quick wins they need to have. Remember, this is a leader in transition, right? They're coming in new to the role, and there is an expectation that they're going to perform. And then certainly, if they're coming in from the outside, it could be about navigating the culture. And again, I will never forget this. This actually shocked me. I was setting up a new senior vice president who had been hired from the outside to come into an organization, vice president, and I was talking to the CEO about what the success measures were and what the priorities were as a way to prepare for executive coaching. And the leader told me, well, we hired him for his expertise, so what do you mean I have to spend time with him? Can't he just come in and do his role? And that was honestly the expectation of the CEO, and I won't name the company because your mouths would all fall open. And so we gently worked with the CEO to course correct that perception, and then certainly gave the vice president lots and lots of support from many different venues. The coaching helped him to create a really good coalition and to build that team. So he had the support that he needed, and I'm very happy to say that he's been very, very successful in spite of the CEO's thinking that he wasn't going to need any sort of support.
Right. And I think, Patricia, CEOs and executive teams can collapse setting clear goals with telling new executives how they should achieve them. Because I think it is fair to expect senior people to have a sense of how to go about achieving their goals, right? But they do have to know what the board or the C-suite actually expects of them and how their success is going to be measured. So that's great. A great transition also includes building a coalition, which we talked a little bit about before. And I also use the term playing field. It's my experience, and it's our coach's experience at Blanchard, that often new executives and senior leaders or leaders just do not really have a clear picture of the field that they are playing on. What game are they playing? Who's on their team? Who isn't on their team? What does success look like? Where are the goalposts? So, I'm not a big sports person, but I do find that the sports analogies tend to really work here. Who do you need to have relationships with? Who's flying under the radar that you need to know about? And in one case, we worked with a senior executive who didn't understand that he needed to have a relationship with the CEO's senior assistant. I mean, it might seem obvious to some people, but it certainly wasn't to him. And then building a great team. Now, again, there are 100,000 books on building a great team, but the key is for the new leader to decide what they're going to do, what a great team looks like, what the roles are going to be, what the norms are going to be, who's doing what, and how to leverage the best from each person on their team. And this is just basics. And then finally, a great transition includes avoiding personal pitfalls. Because people are often aware of their weaknesses or their flaws, and they put quite a bit of attention managing around those flaws. I mean, you might even be thinking, well, not even. But often that is the case. But I think even more often, people in new jobs are not aware that the strengths that got them into their new job are no longer the strengths that they can depend on to get them to the next level or even make them successful in their current role. So, really quick example, the manager who used to take a lot of pride in doing everything at 100% and doing everything super, super well and blowing people away with the quality of the work, now in a more senior role, not able to do all that work herself, has to build the skills of the team to have them do the work. And that it's not just delegation skills, it's actually learning how to not be the big star of the team. So it's a bunch of little things that can get in a person's way that have made them successful up until now. And it's very hard for people to see that without a mirror, the coach holding up the mirror. And then a great transition also includes letting go. So a bunch of different levels of letting go, but first, letting go of the previous job, which can be really hard because sometimes there's an expectation that the person's going to do both jobs, especially if it's an internal promotion. Kind of straddle, do your old job until the new person gets comfortable. Oh, and start doing your new job. So that's crazy, but it happens all the time. Also, letting go of accountability and a feeling of emotional responsibility and connection to your old job and the way things used to get done, and to your old group of people. Very sad sometimes to let go of an old job, which is the third piece of letting go. It's kind of a dirty little secret of moving into a new job, even if you're all excited because it's more money, big promotion, wonderful thing, but it doesn't mean that it isn't sad to let go of the old job. And sometimes people actually need to mourn their old team, mourn a chapter of a career. And even though it's all good and it's all exciting, that doesn't mean it can't be hard to move on. So those are all the things, and it's just the tip of the iceberg, frankly, that's involved in a great transition. And Patricia's going to share a story with you now about some work that we've done in the banking industry.
I have to say, before I tell you this story, which I think is one of the wonderful ways to illustrate what we wanted to share with you today, that these elements, letting go, building a team, creating a coalition, all of these things, when we went and looked at some of the onboarding processes that our clients are using, and we were talking to them about where were their gaps and what was causing them to be successful, the successful transitions included these elements. And for many of our organizational sponsors that we were working with, when I talked to them about this, they were actually surprised to think about the fact that they had to help a leader let go. And when we started to talk about that, they said, gosh, this makes perfect sense. And so I'm very pleased to say that some of the clients we're working with are really re-looking at their onboarding programs to begin to factor in these elements, and whether that's to support their leaders through coaching or other methods and efforts. It's underway with them. So I'm so pleased to hear that from some of our clients. So we wanted to share some stories with you. Again, one of the best ways to illustrate, what's happening. And so one of the bits of work that we did with a Pacific Northwest client was all about transition. And so the purpose of the coaching, we were actually hired to come in as the partner to provide coaching to the executive team. And the goal behind that coaching was to help that executive team to do a couple of different things. One was to improve the communication between team members. So there was a bit of siloing going on. The CEO recognized that, and she really wanted to influence these leaders to be much more collaborative and collegial in how they were working together. That meant sharing information differently. It meant making decisions differently, a number of things like that. She also wanted the executive team to think about their own business units and begin to think about succession planning and leadership pipeline, so that there were always leaders at readiness to take on new roles. And that was a huge challenge for the organization, and one that they recognized was putting them at risk. So we come into the organization, we begin to work with the leaders. We start working with each of them on their own brands and methods of communication and how we might improve that. We also help them think about how to develop their teams, and part of that was succession planning. Part of it was developing key members in specific skills or concepts that they needed to focus on. And we helped them really start to do some planning around succession, right? Who were the leaders that were going to take on the key and critical roles if someone left, if someone was promoted, or if someone retired? And the fourth thing that cropped up with all of the leaders, including the CEO who brought us in to do this coaching, was that there needed to be a focus on strengthening community ties. So that had largely fell to the CEO to do that, to be out in the community, to be the voice of the bank, and to build those critical relationships and to make the bank seen as a partner in the local communities. And so she really wanted to instill that effort and those ideas with her executive team and ask them to step up into that role as well. So coaching began, we're working on all these things, and then the best of plans went completely and unexpectedly awry. The CEO very unexpectedly passed away. This is 3 months into the executive coaching that we're doing. Very unexpected occurrence. The bank was shocked. They were grieving. The community was in shock. The community was grieving. It could not have been more unexpected. And so the COO of the company, who was the heir apparent and was being groomed to take over the CEO's role in about a 3 to 5 year runway, was asked to step in as the acting CEO. And there were a number of things that he had to do right away. The first was he had to manage the reactions of people over the death of this beloved CEO, and to make sure that people knew that the bank would continue and be successful, and that he really had to step up and into that role in a way that inspired confidence. So in terms of rising to the occasion, as he was working with his executive coach, the first thing he needed to do was take time to reflect and to be introspective about, did he want this role, this CEO role, permanently and forever moving forward? And that was a question that he had been grappling with as he had begun to engage in coaching, and he continued to work on that, and now it became obviously very critical that he do that and make that decision quickly, because if he didn't want the role, he was going to need to support the board of directors in recruiting and hiring someone. He did decide that it was the role for him, and he did want it to pursue forward. And so he realized, again, with the help of his executive coach, that he needed to build relationships with the board of directors that he did not currently have strong relationships with. That had always fallen to his CEO. She had groomed him. She had given him opportunities to speak to them, but not to the degree that he really needed to have them in his corner, especially if he wanted to be named permanently into the role. It was also incredibly important for him to calm the waters, both in the organization because of the fear of the unknown, the churn that was going on, the what's going to happen next. Is my job okay? Is the bank going to be okay? Are we going to retain our clients? Is our executive team going to stay in place? You know, there was a huge amount of unknown that people were really concerned about, and it was causing performance to slip a bit. And so his role had to become very quickly the public face of saying, yes, everything's going to be fine. We're going to be okay. We are going to survive and thrive beyond this calamity. And finally, it was immediate that he had to begin to step in and continue to build those community relationships. And so there was a very concerted effort on his part to do so. And again, this is all with the support of his executive coach, helping him to think things through and to figure these things out. So in terms of the final outcome, I was so very pleased. I was the one managing the relationship with the client and managing the team of coaches in there. I was so very thrilled and pleased to hear that the board of directors unanimously decided to vote him in as the CEO of the company, and that since then, it's been about 2 years since this has happened, 18 months, 2 years, that the bank is continuing to thrive and be successful under his leadership. He is quite happy as the CEO, so he's personally very content with his vision and mission and strategy, and his executive team has responded incredibly well to him taking over this role. So in terms of a wonderful success story, what he said, both to his coach and to our organizational sponsor, as he went through this process. And this was several months later. He came back and said, I could not have done this without the help of my executive coach. He gives full credit to that experience, and certainly he did the hard work, but I'm so very proud of the executive coach that was working with him and the work that she did to help him get to these outcomes. So that's the Pacific Northwest story. What we found in this example and in this story were a number of benefits to the transition, to coaching in transition. Pardon me, I need to cough. And so when we think about this, I'm going to have Matt talk about the benefits of transition coaching. When you think about this, I would say think about this in terms of, who are the leaders in your organization that are in transition, and what might they be going through, and what might be necessary for them to be thinking about in order to be successful in their roles. So Madeleine, if you would like to talk about benefits.
So perfect for the busy leader. I mean, I hate to say it, but often our clients are in their cars, and sometimes they don't have their own office, so they go down to their car and sit in the parking lot. But it works. It increases retention of knowledge and new skills, offers a safe learning lab to practice skills. I mean, a lot of coaches on this call, you do a lot of practicing difficult conversations you need to have, saying hard things possibly. Also provides a role model. If managers and leaders are supposed to be coaching their people, what does it even sound like, feel like, smell like to have good coaching? And offers practice in a place to really think through and handle challenging situations. So we'll quickly share another success story in a completely different environment. Retail, big retail organization, and they were looking at coaching to support newly recruited and newly promoted leaders to ensure on-the-job success. And we got a question earlier, what does failure mean? In this case, failure meant literally new leaders leaving the organization, or their teams streaming away from the organization like rats from a sinking ship. So our measure of success here was the leader stays with the company for 3.5 years or more with a high level of performance. The team feedback is positive, and the team meets or exceeds their goals. So we coached 456 leaders, 423 of whom were in transition due to a promotion. So where were these participants focusing with their coaches? We're able to collect this information because of our coaching management system, and after every conversation, our coaches report back on the areas that we're focused on. It's anonymous, so no confidentiality is breached, but it does give us a way to collect on trends of where people are focusing in their coaching sessions. So 83% on operational effectiveness, how people are functioning in the culture and being measured on daily, weekly, and monthly sales, 86% on goal setting, so how were people getting their arms around exactly what was expected of them, having clear agreements in place so they could understand what success actually looked like. 92% on communication, so cross-functional collaboration, communication, and ensuring very clear understanding on priorities with their teams, and 94% impact and influence. So to what extent were people focused on how do I influence others to get the results that I'm looking for? So really fun to be able to see that. And in the outcomes, what we found was in an 18-month period, they retained 5 leaders who seriously considered leaving the organization. and this was valued at a $350,000 savings. I mean, when you think about what goes into getting a new leader up to speed, 91% of them said that they gained clarity on expectations because of their coaching, and 94% said they had better relationships with their teams. So the feedback on that particular intervention was, here we'll just show you a whole bunch of quotes and you can speed read them at your leisure. But, you know, my question is, and of course I'm a coach, I've started several coaching organizations. Obviously, I'm a true believer. I have a coach myself. Is why would we expect anyone from whom we expected intense performance to not do better with a coach? Nobody does that in sports. Nobody does that in the arts. And yet we do it in businesses and organizations all the time. So my question is, and has been, and will continue to be, is what if everyone in transition had a coach to help them reach their full potential? What kind of a difference would that make in your organization? And yes, coaching is expensive. There's no question about it. But isn't it a lot more expensive to have a new leader bomb out? I mean, just in terms of dollars, forget the human impact. So we've broken down coaching into kind of different levels. Patricia, I'll turn it back over to you.
Thank you, Madeleine. And a lot of this comes from when we are working with our organizational sponsors or clients who are purchasing coaching from us as a partner. They often want tiered availability for coaches, right? So they believe that the coaching for a CEO needs to look a little bit different than the coaching for a line level manager. And we actually agree with that as well, because there are different things that those people need to focus on, and certainly there are different price points that can come with that type of coaching. So when we look at coaching for leaders, what we work with our clients to provide is really this focus on clarifying personal development needs, right? So this is line level leaders all the way up to about director level, certainly to help them improve their self-reliance and communication and effectiveness. And so this is common that leaders that are moving into these roles need support in these areas. We also help them focus on developing trusting and respectful relationships. And so as we've talked about leaders in transition today and really some of the challenges that they face, this makes sense, right? That people need to think about what are the relationships they have around them and how do they build relationships that are going to help them be effective in the organization. And finally, also to help them think about their role in developing their people and teams. And so when you think about what is leadership and what does it mean to be a leader, like coaching definitions, there are 1,000 different definitions on leadership. At the Ken Blanchard companies, we believe that leadership is about being in service to others, right? You don't lead someone, you lead with them. And so this idea of helping develop people and helping develop teams, we think is a critical role for leaders at all levels in the organization. Every leader that works with us has access to something that we call the coaching management system, full of tools and resources, and it's meant to enhance the experience. And I share that with you because coaching as a standalone is a great methodology, and there are often things that need to happen around that coaching to help that leader be successful. So we're going to share with you the other types of coaching that we do, just with an idea of what are the types of things that leaders focus on. So we'll have Madeleine talk about the next type.
Well, actually, we're not going to share it because Dave Witt is like waving the big red flag at me now and telling me we really need to wrap up. We do offer coaching for senior leaders, and it's a little bit different, and we do offer coaching for CEOs, which is also different. I would say the biggest difference in those kinds of coaching is that we offer kind of a retainer with unlimited access to the coach, which makes a big difference. But I have to turn it over back to Dave now because it's time.
That's great, Madeleine. Thank you so much, and thanks for being cognizant of the time. The good news is all the things that Patricia and Madeleine are sharing with us in terms of coaching for senior leaders and also in terms of coaching for CEOs. They'll be in the recording and the deck that we sent to you. One of the things we wanted to make sure, though, is that we offered you an opportunity to follow up on what we've learned today. And then also just want to get to two questions that were asked during the course of the presentation. Before we go into Q&A, I want to open up a poll for each of you to participate in, because I'm guessing that there's a lot of different types of ways that we can follow up with you. So take a look on this slide. We've opened up a poll on the right-hand side. If you would like more information on transition coaching, go ahead and choose A on the poll on the right. If you would like information on upcoming events, like this one that you attended today, our webinar series, very popular on a monthly basis, choose B. You can choose more than one thing. If you're ready to discuss your coaching initiative, and in particular transition coaching, we'd love to talk to you about that. Go ahead and put C in the mix. Once you've made your three choices, hit that submit button. That'll send your responses to us, and we'll follow up with you in the way that you've asked us to. As we start to close out today's presentation, Madeleine and Patricia talked to us a little bit about what are some of the ways that people define failure when it comes to successfully transition coaching. Of course, it basically boils down to not meeting the objectives that the organization had. As we close out today's session, another question that came in that I wanted to ask Madeleine and Patricia is, what are your thoughts on using this recording? I think folks realize we covered a lot of really cool things today. We made the case for coaching. But I don't know if you two would say, oh, just send somebody the recording. I don't know if that would be the best thing to do, or if you're like, no, let us work together with you about how to do that. What are your thoughts on that?
Yeah, this is Patricia. I would say that this recording is definitely full of useful information, and that if you want support in thinking through or talking about transition coaching, that we would be happy to meet with you and consult with you on that.
That's great. Thank you, Patricia. And that kind of reminds me of one of the things that we talked about, and we've got it on this slide here, as far as the best way. I mean, folks have talked to us using the poll to discuss your coaching initiatives. We really want to encourage you to contact us for a free consultation examining what you're hoping to do in your organization. Any words of encouragement, Patricia, for folks that might be sitting on the fence? They think that might be a good idea. They're a little worried, nervous, afraid of talking to us. What would your words of encouragement be?
I would say two things. The first is that talking to us is a way for you to build your coalition. So we encourage you to do that. And I believe that the more coaching out there in the world, the better. And we are dedicated and committed to that at Blanchard. And so happy to have a conversation with you. I think we're all in this together. And if we can help leaders be successful and not fail, that's only to the good in the world.
That's great. Thank you, Patricia. Hey, one last thing that I want to let everybody know about. So often after we finish one of these presentations, the question that you wanted to ask comes to you, of course, 5 minutes after we finish. If you do have a question that I can help forward to Madeleine or to Patricia, let me give you a special email box that you can send it to. And Katie, thanks for typing that into the chat box. It's webinars@kenblanchard.com. Send your question to webinars@kenblanchard.com. I'll forward that to Patricia and Madeleine, and we'll get you an individual response. Patricia, Madeleine, thank you so much for taking us through this look at coaching and transition coaching in particular. We've really appreciated your time today. And thanks to all of you who have joined us for this Blanchard event focused on coaching. We hope you'll join us again in another Blanchard event in the near future. This concludes today's presentation. Thanks for joining us today, and we hope to see you again very soon. Thanks, everyone.